Hello, and thank you for your interest in volunteering with the St. Louis Arc. Volunteers are an essential part to our mission and enrich both the programs we run and the lives of the people we support. In this presentation, we will explore the history of the Arc, how to support someone with an intellectual or developmental disability, volunteer policies, and much more. This presentation contains a lot of information in a short time. You are encouraged to pause and take breaks as frequently as you need to. If you have any questions about the topics covered or anything else, please bring them with you to your interview. At the conclusion of this presentation, we will ask you to complete a short questionnaire to confirm that you understand the key ideas and policies that are discussed. The St. Louis Arc's mission is to empower people with intellectual and developmental disabilities and their families to lead better lives by providing a lifetime of high-quality services, family support, and advocacy. As an ARC volunteer, you are an important part of this mission. Volunteers engage with a variety of our programs, working directly with the people we support in many of the same ways our staff do. We focus on providing individualized services to the people we support. It is important for us to build strong relationships with our participants. Some people with intellectual and developmental disabilities do not have many natural supports in their lives. Volunteers may help them feel connected socially when they otherwise may feel isolated. You are not just a volunteer, you play a very important role in our agency. The St. Louis Arc was founded in 1950 by a group of parents of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Up until this time, people with these disabilities were not included in the greater community, and many lived in an institution or at home in isolation. They did not have the opportunity to go to school, go to work, or regularly socialize with people out in the community. These parents wanted to provide a better life for their children and decided to attend the first convention of the Arc of the U.S. held in Minneapolis that year. Upon returning, they decided to hold their own meeting, expecting only a small group of people to attend, and over 100 came. The ARC started off as an advocacy-only organization and has steadily grown from there to provide all of the services we do today. The first two programs the ARC offered were respite care and leisure support services. The leisure department still provides the majority of our volunteer opportunities to this day. The ARC's programs currently serve over 4,000 people per year in the St. Louis area. The St. Louis Arc has several strategic partnerships that have helped define our programs and services over the years. The Arc of the U.S. is a national organization with nearly 700 state and local chapters throughout the United States. They establish the core values and mission for all of the regional and local chapters and provide guidance, but each ARC chapter is independently operated. The Arc of the U.S. also advocates for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities at the national level. The St. Louis Arc has had a long-standing relationship with the United Way of Greater St. Louis. Through this partnership, the United Way helps fund many of the children's services the ARC offers, including Child Garden and Capable Kids and Families. They also accredit the ARC's volunteer program and provide resources to enrich the program, including information on best practices in volunteer management and recruitment. Since the 1980s, the St. Louis Arc has been accredited by the Council on Quality and Leadership, or CQL. This partnership highlights the dedication the agency has had to providing high-quality services for many decades and which remains part of our mission statement today. In 2016, the agency achieved accreditation with distinction, being only the 8th organization in the world to do so. CQL constantly challenges us to reflect on how best we can improve during accreditation, providing invaluable feedback and guidance. The St. Louis Arc supports people with various intellectual and developmental disabilities. It is important to distinguish the difference between the two because they are not mutually exclusive. An intellectual disability affects an individual's capacity to learn, reason, and problem solve. A developmental disability affects an individual's physical or cognitive development before the age of 22. People can have multiple diagnoses in one or both of these categories. There are various causes of intellectual and developmental disabilities, and sometimes there can be a disability present that does not have a known cause. Causes can be genetic in nature, such as with autism or Down syndrome. the result of environmental factors such as infections or exposure to toxic substances, as with rubella infection during pregnancy, or injuries or lack of oxygen at birth, as with cerebral palsy. The only fully preventable intellectual and developmental disabilities are fetal alcohol syndrome and early lead exposure. The St. Louis Arc provides education and advocacy through its Go the Whole Nine campaign to raise awareness of and help prevent fetal alcohol syndrome. Intellectual and developmental disabilities cannot be cured because they are not diseases. The impact of a disability can be lessened through early intervention, education, training, therapy, and adaptive measures, but the St. Louis Arc maintains that people with disabilities are whole people. They may have a disability that makes them different from typically developing people, but there's nothing wrong with that. The majority of the St. Louis Arc's volunteer opportunities are in a direct support role. While working with the individuals the Arc supports, it is important for all volunteers to be familiar with our Person First philosophy. Person First philosophy is a belief that all people are worthy of respect, regardless of ability. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities have the same rights and responsibilities as other members of the community, and in turn, they deserve to have access to the same opportunities as anyone else. For example, Gerber picked a new Gerber baby for 2018, Lucas Warren, pictured below, from Dalton, Georgia, who has Down syndrome. Most of the headlines that announced this historic event were great examples of Person First language. Lucas was just named 2018 Gerber Baby. He has Down syndrome. First baby with Down syndrome wins Gerber Baby contest. However, one was not so great. Gerber sends the right message in picking Down syndrome Gerber Baby. Do you spot the difference? The first two list Lucas first and state that he has Down syndrome, whereas the third one refers to him as Down syndrome Gerber Baby. This is disrespectful because Down syndrome is only part of who Lucas is, and it does not define him. Person First language is all about respect. You are putting the person before their disability. How you say something can impact someone else's self-esteem. Rather than saying he has behavior problems, you could say he needs additional behavior support. Or instead of saying someone is nonverbal, you could say she does not use words to communicate, or she uses sign language to communicate. It is a subtle change, but makes a huge difference in presenting that person as an individual with needs rather than problems or deficits. You can reference page 5 of the Volunteer Handbook for more examples of Person First language. You will also receive more information on the etiquette of interacting with someone with a disability. The St. Louis Arc has many different volunteers from all walks of life with different skills to offer. An ARC volunteer is anybody who is able to fulfill the needs of a program and has a willingness to help. The ARC's application process is designed to keep the people the agency supports safe. It is important to make sure that volunteers are thoroughly vetted and placed in positions that allow for them to use their skills to enrich the lives of the program participants. All new volunteers are required to go through our intake process. Volunteers must complete all the required paperwork and return it. This includes the background check form if the volunteer is 18 or older. Volunteers must watch this volunteer orientation presentation and respond to the assessment at the end. Volunteers must schedule an interview with the volunteer coordinator, and volunteers will attend any additional training sessions based on their specific assignment. Volunteers are encouraged to ask questions about the information shared during this presentation while at the interview. Volunteers should also discuss program areas they are interested in working with. If you are unsure of what is available at the time of the interview, the volunteer coordinator would be happy to inform you of any areas of need. All volunteers may request to see their personnel files at any time. These files can be provided either electronically or as a hard copy. Please contact the volunteer coordinator to obtain them. All volunteer assignments are based on the needs of the agency at that moment. A majority of our volunteer projects are direct support assignments, meaning volunteers will be working directly with people we support. However, we do offer indirect support assignments. If you are interested in helping with office support work or setting up a special project, please notify the volunteer coordinator. After volunteer jobs are assigned, the volunteer will report directly to the identified supervisor of the volunteer job. The volunteer coordinator will continue to be a resource for the volunteer and acts in a support role once intake is completed. During the course of your volunteer assignment, you may learn a lot of personal information about someone the ARC supports. All of this information is protected by the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1996, commonly referred to as HIPAA. All items determined to be protected health information are covered under this law, including name, address, medical diagnoses, employer, and any services that person may receive from the ARC or other agencies. It is important for volunteers to not share any of this information outside of the programs you are working with. Always refer to people supported in the program by first name, initials, or a fake name in order to keep their information confidential. Volunteers are welcome to refuse a job assignment if the burden of confidentiality is too much. It is important to note that if a volunteer releases confidential information to unauthorized individuals, the volunteer will be immediately dismissed from that job assignment and could potentially be legally liable for the breach. During the course of your volunteer assignment, it may be important for you to be aware of any health concerns for individuals who you are working with. Report any changes in behavior or unusual behavior that someone you support may exhibit. In some cases, that person may just be feeling off that day, but it could also be indicative of a serious underlying health problem. In the event that someone you are supporting has a seizure, it is important to know how to handle the situation. Even if a volunteer is not certified in CPR and first aid, he or she can still help out. If the individual has never had a seizure before, or if the seizure lasts more than 5 minutes, a 911 call is necessary, usually determined by the program supervisor. The person experiencing the seizure needs to have space. Volunteers can help with crowd control to clear the area. Make sure the person having the seizure does not have any foreign objects placed in their mouth. Contrary to commonly held beliefs, this can cause harm to that individual. It is not possible for someone to swallow their tongue while having a seizure. Most importantly, the person will need time and space to rest. The volunteer can act as a companion during this time and make sure the individual's needs are met. In regards to safety, your supervisor should have a discussion with you based around any safety concerns for the program you are working with. Ask about any emergency procedures or evacuation procedures due to weather or emergency conditions. Safety concerns differ based on each program and location. Ask your supervisor to review items to be mindful of prior to attending the program. It is important to remember that you should be attentive when supporting someone, but do not smother them. In the event of an emergency, the volunteer coordinator will be notified if a volunteer is involved. All programs that operate out of one of the St. Louis ARC's locations have access to both first aid and OSHA kits if they are needed. These items can also be found in agency vehicles if the program takes place out in the community. Volunteers should not handle bodily fluids unless they are CPR and first aid certified. Always wear gloves when handling fluids and thoroughly wash your hands afterwards. At the St. Louis ARC, we take all potential abuse and neglect situations seriously. Abuse is defined as hurting someone deliberately, whereas neglect is failing to care for someone properly. Many times, neglect can be a consequence of burnout in a caregiver, whether that person is paid to be in that person's life or is a family member. It is important that we take action in the event of a potentially abusive or neglectful environment as soon as possible. Volunteers should report any suspected abuse or neglect immediately to ARC staff, including your supervisor, the coordinator of the program you are working with, or the volunteer coordinator. Be on the lookout for any signs of abuse or neglect, notable changes in behavior, physical signs such as bruises or malnourishment, or self-reporting. The St. Louis ARC has trained staff that conduct investigations into potentially abusive or neglectful situations and make a determination based on his or her findings with the president and CEO of the agency. If there is a clear-cut situation of abuse or neglect, our responsibility as mandated reporters means that we will make a report with the proper law enforcement agency. However, if there is not conclusive evidence, we will still take action to make sure that person is safe. So, If you see something, say something. Remember that you are not making an accusation against someone, you are asking a question, because our number one priority is the safety of the people we support. While volunteers at the St. Louis Arc fulfill many of the same basic needs as staff, there are many tasks that Arc staff receive special training for that volunteers should refrain from doing. If you have any questions about these policies or the reasoning behind them, you are welcome to ask during your interview. Medication. Volunteers should never give any medication at any time to a program participant. This includes any over-the-counter medications such as Tylenol. Direct support staff attend special training to administer medications and maintain the documentation of medication records. If someone asks you for medication, direct them to your supervisor. Personal care. Volunteers can assist in a variety of ways, but they are not to support a program participant with any personal care. For instance, you are welcome to accompany someone to the restroom, but your responsibility ends when that person enters the bathroom stall. If they need help with any personal care or a transfer from adaptive equipment, ARC support staff should assist. Also, if someone needs assistance with eating, support staff should help out, not a volunteer. Weapons. Volunteers should not bring weapons either on their person or in their vehicle to their volunteer site. Substance abuse. Volunteers need to show up for their shift sober. Adults of age are welcome to use legal substances on their own time, but they will be immediately dismissed from the ARC's volunteer program if they show up intoxicated. Harassment. There are many people of diverse backgrounds that are involved with the ARC, the people we support, employees, and other volunteers. Be mindful of what you say and always use respectful and inclusive language. Everyone involved in a program deserves to be treated with respect, and no one, including you, should be harassed at any time. Attendance. We generally ask that volunteers give 48 hours or more of notice if they are unable to make a shift. This is to ensure that our programs can run in the way that they are intended, and without having to cancel due to being understaffed. Program participants pay to be there, so we want to make sure that they have a quality experience. When we have appropriate advance notice, we can find someone else to fill in. However, we do understand that emergencies can come up. There will not be any disciplinary action taken unless there is a pattern of absences. Transportation. Volunteers are only responsible for transporting themselves to and from a program. Volunteers should not drive program participants or staff at any time. If someone is stranded at the conclusion of a program or needs help locating transportation, you are welcome to assist that individual with making a phone call or keeping them company, but it is not your responsibility to give them a ride. Photos. Volunteers should not be taking pictures of participants or staff during their volunteer times unless instructed or asked by their volunteer supervisor. If a volunteer is asked to take photos, they must do two things before taking any photos during a program. One, ask permission of the person you want to photograph. You should not take or use a picture of someone if they do not want you to. And two, make sure that the participants have a photo release on file. Have your volunteer supervisor confirm if there are releases on file. There are many people we support who have legal guardians that may not want that person's image publicly associated with the ARC. No volunteer should upload any photos to any social media site or website without the consent of the Director of Communications at the St. Louis Arc. Any photos that a volunteer takes should be sent to their volunteer supervisor to be added to the ARC's photo library. Gifts and donations. It is important that volunteers do not give or receive gifts to or from participants in a program. This can unintentionally show favoritism and cause friction with other participants. If you wish to donate an item or make a monetary donation to a program that supports an individual, the volunteer coordinator would be happy to connect you with our fundraising staff. Dress code. Volunteers are encouraged to dress appropriately for the event that they are going to. If you are attending a sports program, wearing athletic clothing is generally advised. If you are helping at an art program, do not wear anything you are worried about getting paint on. Volunteers should dress comfortably. Casual wear is generally acceptable in most positions. Always wear closed-toed shoes for your safety. Volunteers should be aware that they should not wear anything ripped, revealing, or with profanity or paraphernalia on it. Holidays. Programs generally do not run during holidays. If you are volunteering with a program that runs during business hours, the St. Louis Arc is closed for all major federal holidays. For a list of closures, ask your supervisor or check our website for more information. If you are working with a leisure program, there will generally not be sessions scheduled the week of a holiday. If the program runs once per month, the program will be shifted to a different week to make sure that everyone involved can attend. Your supervisor will also provide you with the schedule of all the program dates. Inclement weather. In the case of a closure due to weather, there are several different ways to find out if a program is operating that day or not. If you are working with a program that operates during business hours, you can call the site to find out or contact your supervisor. If you are working with a leisure program that runs in the evening or on weekends, you can call the leisure cancellation line, which the volunteer coordinator will provide for you. The recording is updated up to 2 hours before the start of a program. If you are unable to get details on the program you are working with through that number, you can also call the coordinator on call phone. See page 14 of the volunteer handbook for this phone number. If you follow the St. Louis Arc on Facebook or Twitter, you can often find information about program closures posted there, again, approximately 2 hours prior to the start of the program. Smoking. The St. Louis Arc maintains non-smoking facilities. However, there are designated areas in which you can smoke. Please ask your supervisor for more information. Volunteer secondary insurance. The St. Louis Arc has a volunteer insurance policy in the event that a volunteer is injured during an assignment. The volunteer should seek treatment through the doctor or a hospital of his or her choice and save all documentation of what was paid out of pocket. The volunteer should immediately report the injury to his or her supervisor and receive an incident report form. The volunteer should fill out the form, attach documentation, and return the form to either the volunteer coordinator or the HR representative listed on the form. This is a reimbursement program, so allow for time for your claim to be processed. Disciplinary action. When the St. Louis Arc accepts volunteers for service, it is with the understanding that such service is at the sole discretion of the Arc. There is an expectation of behaviors that volunteers are asked to maintain. Volunteers should act with integrity and honesty at all times, act in a positive and professional manner, and display a spirit of friendliness and cooperation with other volunteers, Arc employees, program participants, family members, community members, or others they may come in contact with during their volunteer duties. If a volunteer does not maintain these standards, the Arc maintains the right to dismiss that volunteer from service at any time. Consult your volunteer handbook for more information. If a volunteer has any concerns about his or her assignment, he or she can contact the volunteer coordinator for assistance. Volunteer orientation is the first training that all volunteers go through. Orientation educates you on the background of the Arc and prepares you for your future role as a direct support volunteer. We have many opportunities for enrichment and education for St. Louis Arc volunteers. Whether you are interested in learning more about disability services as a professional in the field, taking CPR and first aid classes, or other professional development opportunities, you are welcome to take advantage of trainings we offer to our staff. The St. Louis Arc has an online training platform called Relias, allowing volunteers to access hundreds of modules from anywhere or sign up for any in-person trainings that we offer. Volunteers are also welcome to attend our Family Workshop series, which offers informational sessions on resources for people with disabilities and their families. These sessions are open to the general public for free. Ask the volunteer coordinator for the current schedule or visit our website for more details. Volunteers have the opportunity to share skills, educate the community about disability issues, and positively impact the lives of others. As an Arc volunteer, no matter the assignment, you can have a great impact on the people you interact with. While we have come a long way over the years since the Arc was founded in regards to respect and inclusion of people who have developmental and intellectual disabilities, there is still a lot of work to do. As an ARC volunteer, you not only become an ambassador for the agency, but you also become an ambassador for the people we support by spreading the message to others that we are all more alike than different and that there is value in everyone, no matter their differences. Many people who the ARC supports may not have the opportunities to go out and connect with people from their community. Even just spending time with someone can make a huge difference in helping that individual feel included and appreciated. Remember, you are not just a volunteer. You are making a big difference in someone's life. That concludes our online presentation. Thank you for your interest in being an ARC volunteer. Please follow the link below to fill out the assessment. The volunteer coordinator will be in touch with you to schedule an interview after reviewing your results.